Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Visit Malaysia 2026 kicked off recently with the campaign targeting high-yield tourists and longer stays. Now, this will no doubt put renewed attention on destinations beyond the traditional tourist hotspots and also on how Malaysia manages pressure on the places already at capacity. So tonight on the show, we'll ask, can tourism growth in Malaysia be spread more evenly? And are the secondary destinations ready to step into the spotlight? Joining me on the show to discuss this further is Nigel Wong, who's the president of the Malaysian Association of Tour and Travel Agents, better known as MATTA. Nigel, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. So let's talk about the narrative around the Visit Malaysia 2026 campaign. So there's a lot of talk about attracting high yield longer stays, so tourists who stay longer, spend more, essentially. I'm wondering what this means for the industry. How has the industry had to change to support this type of goal, to support this type of traveller?
Well, I think in light of the recent COVID pandemic, and after we came out of it, the tourism sort of changed almost overnight, with an emphasis more on the experience rather than just the package tour itself. So while this is nothing new, in Malaysia, it was sort of heralded by a sudden awareness of domestic tourists about what was in their own backyard. Naturally, this came about because people, desperately needed to travel. But the good part was that with the sudden surge in demand, we started seeing a lot of innovation when it came to some of the products, tourism products that we already had in Malaysia. And we also saw quite a bit of new products coming to the market and destinations being opened up even further, meaning, it's not just a singular destination, but even regular or old destinations which had new areas and attractions open up. So in light of that question that you posed earlier on, because there was a renaissance, so to speak, of new tourism products, and these were mostly spearheaded by the young, by those who were more in the personal circles, we started seeing a lot more products that were designed a lot more for what we currently consider high-yield tourists, but at that time, tailored more for the experience. So in short, new experiential products are generally going to be in demand by what we consider to be high-yield tourists.
Right. So this kind of dispersal, so we know that tourism in Malaysia previously has always been concentrated to a handful of hotspots, so to speak. So when you talk about this desire to see or innovation in the tourism industry, has that been organic? Has that been a more organic kind of growth, or has there been efforts, policy interventions to disperse tourists to other less visited areas?
Well, I think what's happened is it's transitioned for something that was a bit more organic or ad hoc into something that was a little bit more organized. And we're not totally there yet, because to do something a little bit more structured, you need a bit more planning, you need a bit more funding, and you're going to need public-private partnerships to make it work. And so I would say that we're actually just at the cusp, the beginning of this movement. And with any luck, we'll continue to see it grow, and we'll continue to see more and more, new destinations open up and actually be developed to cater for tourists. So in terms of dispersal, yes, it does help a little bit, especially with domestic tourists who at one point in time, they were looking for different things to do in their own backyard. And that, the new product sort of provided that kind of avenue. But that being said, while we have new products, it needs to go hand in hand with development of the right infrastructure, especially the mobility infrastructure, to really, really help bring tourists to lesser known destinations and newer destinations.
Right. So when you bring up mobility, I'm thinking that there needs to land transportation will need to be strengthened to make sure that tourism to lesser known hotspots or lesser known areas will be improved. Talk to me about that from an industry standpoint. What do you think needs to happen so travelers, both domestic and international, are ready to move beyond the usual destinations? They feel confident in visiting some of these lesser known, lesser visited regions.
Well, in a way, I would say they apply both to the micro and the macro level, right? So at the macro level, you've got flight connectivity. Now, flight connectivity is still coming back post-COVID. We do have, problems in the industry such as shortage of aircraft, parts, etc., etc., and that's slowly being, solved. But until then, we still do have gaps in our connectivity throughout Malaysia, right? Especially to places like the East Coast, for example, better timing, more flights, and even to Borneo, Sabah, and Sarawak as well. Um, and for Borneo, we're looking more at international incoming flights, right? Because in the past, for example, in KK, we used to have a lot more flights coming from, say, Korea, directly from Korea, Japan, so on and so forth. And that brought in a lot of tourists directly into Sabah. And so we're hoping to see a renewal of those routes, going back into Borneo. Now, we can also look at it from a land transportation perspective. Of course, rail is going to be one of the key modes of transportation in the future for Malaysia. It's, widely used in countries like Japan, in Europe, and it really does help connect more rural or remote areas, to the general tourism crowds, right? So that's definitely going to help. But even on a micro level, so if you look at the city, we're also talking about mobility in terms of being able to go from one point in the city to the next conveniently and safely, right? And it also includes things like proper walkways, lighting. So the definition of mobility is not just getting from point A to point B, but doing so in comfort and in security.
Oh, wonderful. That's actually an excellent point. How do we think about whether, so once we have the tourists and we want to disperse them, make sure that they're staying longer and they're spending more. For these secondary destinations, if I may use that term, are there concerns that they may not be ready to receive the kind of tourist numbers that Visit Malaysia 2026 is excited to receive? Is there capacity being built? Are we concerned that some of these local communities might not be able to manage and have possible negative impacts to their communities?
Yeah, so that's a tricky question, Melissa, because having increased tourist numbers does mean that there is a risk of over tourism in certain areas that are not equipped to handle them, and it may not just be the infrastructure that we're talking about, but it's also the readiness of the local communities to manage the sudden crowds of people who may want to come to a destination. So on that note, it's really going to have to be there's going to have to be very close collaboration between both the private and public sectors in managing the flow of tourists, but also the expectations of the locals and the tourists visiting these areas. Now, direct stakeholders like travel agents and tour operators and even accommodation providers play an extremely crucial role in doing so. And even some destination attractions, such as those that cater to, for example, nature-based or ecotourism, they have to take responsibility to ensure that while tourists get a great experience when they visit, it's not to the point where it becomes unmanageable and uncontrolled.
Right. So, if we were to look at tourists who have come to the major destinations, the major hotspots, the KLs and the Penangs and the Johors, how do you think we can get them to go to secondary destinations, have them stay longer in the country? Are there roles that MATTA plays or tourism players in those hotspots can play to make sure that there is dispersal of some of that tourist income that we're seeing?
Sure. Look, let's say the long-term infrastructure issues aside, right? What we can do at this point, whether it's the private sector or whether it's the government, is to ensure that we create narratives or stories that are attractive right, to the tourists. Because what's the first thing you do when you go to a country? You say, hey, I want to see something that's cool, that's new, that's nobody's been before. I want to be the first to post up on my Instagram, so to speak. And part of that is going to come from the stories that we tell. uh, Today, most tourists are looking for authenticity when visiting a country, and so our narratives need to revolve around that the idea of authentic experiences, culture, nature. Seeing the people and place for what it is. So, in that regards, MATTA members are actually doing a lot of work on that end. We've seen a lot of really new innovative stuff come out from the industry, not just in terms of new destinations, but an increased awareness that the story matters just as much or even more than the product itself.
So, we're targeting, was it 47 million tourist arrivals this year? Can I ask you, beyond the headline arrival numbers, what would you, Nigel, what would MATTA consider success to be like if we put aside the arrival numbers?
Well, in terms of numbers themselves, right, I'd say it's great to aim high. Okay. Look, it doesn't really matter whether we achieve 47 on the dot or if we're a little bit over, a little bit under, right? The main thing is there's going to be a renewed awareness that Malaysia is a great place to visit. And for MATA, especially, it's more about the long term. So we see the M 2026 like, I don't know, like a Kickstarter campaign, right? Uh, you run it, there's a lot of hype, people get excited, the industry gets together, and makes plans to develop, build, and improve and innovate, right? But what's more important is that that innovation doesn't stop in 2026. And so we're hoping that this will be the beginning of maybe a 5 to 10 year plan, and then we'll really see tourism in Malaysia really start to develop.
Right. Wonderful. Nigel, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. Nigel Wong there from MATTA, the Malaysian Association of Tour and Travel Agents. We're going to take a quick break here and consider this. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. Let's continue our conversation about Visit Malaysia 2026 and what sustainable high-yield tourism could actually look like in practice. To help us do this, we have joining us on the line Justine Vaz, who is the Executive Director of the Habitat Foundation. She's also co-chair of Sustainable Tourism Malaysia. Justine, great to have you back on the show. Thank you so much for joining me today. Happy New Year to you. Let's look at how tourism has traditionally been practiced in Malaysia. Tourism has been very heavily concentrated in a few hotspot destinations. Talk to us about the importance of diversification and also dispersal and why that's so crucial now. And because you're based in Penang, Justine, I'm just wondering what role can established destinations like Penang play in terms of being the kind of gateway to other smaller, lesser known destinations?
Right. So, I mean, Penang definitely has its place in the world, and the twin UNESCO recognitions has firmed it up as one of the must-go places in Southeast Asia. But we don't want to get to a situation where it's one and done for Penang. And we generally, I mean, Penang is also a great creator of travelers, right? There are people who need to escape from Penang every so often. As hard as it is to believe, there is a need to get out of Penang too. And so we are very much, we have so much actually in our hinterland that is awaiting to be discovered. And part of the journey of the Sustainable Tourism Malaysia network is opening up those places to public knowledge. Using geoparks and natural areas as our starting point, our work over the past 2 years has been to find out all of these really valuable excursions, and that would then become part of the tourism focus out of Penang, right? So we envisage a future where people would come to Penang as a gateway, and do all the Penang things, the makan and the historic spots and all that, but then really start to help them understand that they are a part of a very unique and historic region as a whole, right? And one of the specific things has been to realize that colonial history is only part of our history. Reaching further back in time, there was this incredible archaeological heritage when we were part of kingdoms from the north, many kingdoms upon kingdoms, and we were a port city at the time concurrent with Rome, right? So opening up that narrative and bringing in the subject matter experts is helping us to enlarge the storytelling to something that would interest foreign tourists as well as domestic tourists or students. And so it's limitless, right? Our focus, of course, is biodiversity and natural areas, and also really strengthening local economies. And tourism is one of those things where you don't need a heavy investment into things, right? And you can start to create and preserve and create value.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that you talked a little bit about our history beyond the colonial history. Nigel, in my previous interview with him earlier in the show, talked about the importance of storytelling, of telling our stories and making sure that that's part of the experience for travelers here in Malaysia. Talk to me about that, Justine, because you did it so beautifully just now. How do we tell our stories of nature and heritage and culture and help situate visitors who come and want to experience secondary destinations?
Yeah. Generally, placemaking is something that's really coming up very well. And we're fortunate because we have actually so much to discover. But if we're not careful, we will lose those stories. And so over the past 2 years, let's say for Kaki Bukit and Wang Kalian, they've had this wonderful rediscovering as a result of the documentary that was produced and won awards about the tin mining heritage of those caves, right? And with that tin mining heritage is also a story of the Hakka community that had come from mainland China to be part of this incredibly pioneering effort. And when you are in a tiny sleepy hollow like Kaki Bukit, that seems to be, in decline, but you have these rich opportunities to sit with people that were actually mining tin inside the caves, and they will tell you about stories and things that they've experienced that you would never have had a chance to do that. So capturing that through photography and video and murals and helping people tell their own story has actually been a journey of rediscovery for a community that generally would see themselves as, oh, not very special, suddenly realizing like pretty special actually, right? And also that sense of belonging and pride in your origins is something that every single sleepy small town should have the right to develop and share with its next generation. So on the other side, heading down to our nearby town neighbor, our other hill, right? Maxwell Hill, Taiping, and Larut Sepetang areas, all that incredible firsts for Taiping, right? The idea that it was the first conservation area, first this and that museum and all that, all those stories are now being packaged by the Taiping Heritage Society, our partners in this, so that people will come to Taiping and know that, oh, I want to try to do this thing because I heard about it and there is a tour that's been organized by local people and so on. So before we, the thing about sustainable tourism, we always have this idea of tourism is for other people, but mostly tourism is for ourselves, right? What if it's really about reconnecting with our history and our unique place in the world, and the stories of migration and stories of overcoming? I think that's really a place for everyone to belong. And well-managed tourism, the ability to have toilets and parking and good roads, should first of all benefit people who live in those places, right? It's not for other people. If we are able to enjoy, let's say, an arts festival, a music festival like Taiping organized in 2025, it's for you guys. It's for local people in Taiping to really have that celebration and reconnection and sense of pride in the history and culture.
Right. So, bearing that in mind, Justine, how do we make sense of what Visit Malaysia 2026 wants to do? So, there's been a lot of emphasis on what's high yield tourism. When you taking into consideration what you just said, when we think about high yield, what does that mean in real terms? How does it show up? What does it look like in practice for local communities?
Yeah. Okay, so I think there's so many matrices to measure tourism, right? We hear that Penang gets 7 to 8 million visitors by airports alone in the year, right? And so some of for us a measure of that is how meaningful their experience was, and how they spent their time and their money. Person nights in a place, right? Do people stay 1 and 2 days, or do they stay 2 days and then extend and go somewhere else for 3, 4, 5 days? So that level of it. So we talk about slow tourism. To me, slow tourism is really about taking the time to make authentic connections on the ground. I think I've said this before in another interview. The success of tourism is when you feel like I can't wait to come back, right? It's not I did it, done it, going to the next one. No. I had such a meaningful experience here, and I made friends, and I can't wait to come back. Is what we hope that is involved, and of course that means more spending, and all of the supporting businesses should then develop follow-on effects.
Yeah. Are there safeguards that need to be put in place so that as these, as you said, sleepy towns grow and to absorb some of the tourists that come their way and absorb some of the tourist dollars, are there safeguards or practices that actually don't, so it doesn't undermine the fact that these are the places that they come see, but not damaging some of the places that we want to grow under this year's Visit
There's
Malaysia?
a lot of capacity building. I think that I mean, not just for visitors, but for ourselves, about how we conduct ourselves and what we do with our waste. Do we track in and track out? How do we prioritize making sure that we spend local and we purchase local? These are all things that we can be more mindful of. And so that's what one of the things that Sustainable Tourism Malaysia does, is provide more awareness about being very intentional in where you visit, why you visit, and what you do there. And so just creating that awareness. We make no secret about the fact that we're targeting the younger generation, especially with our animation, with Kanchil as the savvy tourism, like the person in the know, because we just generally do feel that younger people are more mindful and changeable, right? They do care about their choices more, and they're just coming into having some of their own money to spend, and they can choose how they want to travel differently. And part of that is investing and getting to fall in love with your own country, I feel. And so, these are not very technical questions, but they actually do really substantially change what a Visit Malaysia year could look like for us. And I think I was talking with Nigel about this earlier, and we said that, this is it's just a trailer, right? Visit Malaysia year is just a trailer for you to get a preview of what you want to do and see, but there's so much out there. So it's just to whet your appetite, and get the hang of it. For us, when we've been working on new products and destinations, we're not there yet in some of them. In some cases, we are just beginning to start to get to the point where we can have a really solid, polished product. But we just want to try it out and run some things by people, see what they like, get feedback, and help us refine that. So what we are aiming to do is, in this next month or so, is actually put out our sustainable tourism map of things to do and see. And everybody is just piling in, right? So we are able to do this countrywide because our network is countrywide. And so let's say, for example, Taiping, of course, is always first out the gate. They've come up with such a really, really adorable campaign called Come to Peace, Come to Taiping. And they've got this beautiful logo of all the overhanging rainforest trees at the gardens. And so they've actually starting to create this brand, which is what? I mean, I think one of the questions you were thinking of asking was about this dispersal, right? And here is a product which is all about peace, right? So they've got 3 new trails, and they're called peace trails, and where they're actually just spreading people out, but also spreading the benefits, and making people interested and excited, so that the tourism is always fresh and very, very honest and sincere.
Right. Justine, as we wrap up our conversation, do you have any advice, I would say, or parting words for our audience tonight, as we ourselves may want to consider being tourists in our own home? Is there anything you would like to see, particularly from the lens of sustainable tourism?
Yeah, I generally do think that we should look at tourism as a revolutionary act, right? It is about investing in the things that you feel are valuable, because all of those decisions about what you choose and what you do and what you spend on are the things that you care about, and the benefits will be seen. Deciding to go and travel off the beaten track in your own country means money spent locally and not in neighboring countries, but helping just us to develop, yeah. So that's one thing. They're making good choices. I would like more people to visit our platform, sustainabletourism.my, where we will be running a lot of the information. A lot of the fantastic stuff is hard to find. And so what we are trying to do is curate it and make it easy to package for you to be curious and explore. Yeah, some of this stuff is not up yet, but also on our social media, we will be very proudly showcasing new trails and activities to familiarize people with. And actually, we would love to hear feedback actually from people to share what they know, what they've seen, as well as what you would like to see more of. It's our hope, because we have been entrusted with using Ministry of Finance money to accelerate local development, that we really deliver impactful results through tourism, but really celebrating our rich heritage. So every year should be Visit Malaysia Year, I think. Yeah, that's our motto, I think.
I agree. I'm excited. I'm excited for the year, for this year to be the trailer to us being appreciating what we have in our country more. Justine, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
All right, bye-bye.
That was Justine Vaz, Executive Director of the Habitat Foundation, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.